The message echoed across every communication channel in known space. On thousands of worlds, millions of screens lit up with the same broadcast from the Galactic Council. High Commander Stone's stern face looked out at the assembled species of the galaxy, his gray skin reflecting the harsh lights of the council chamber. "To all spacefaring civilizations," he announced, his translator converting his words into every known language. "The time has come for our greatest challenge. We seek to identify those truly worthy of leading our galaxy into its next age." In a small meeting room on Earth's orbital station, Captain James Walker watched the broadcast with his team. They were the newest members of the galactic community, having achieved faster-than-light travel just 5 years ago. Many aliens still looked down on humans as primitive newcomers who had rushed into space before they were ready. "The Council has prepared 5 tasks," Stone continued. "Tasks that will test the very limits of what a species can achieve. Those who succeed will earn their place among the greatest civilizations in history." The room grew quiet as Stone listed the challenges. Each one seemed more impossible than the last. Even the most advanced alien races were shaking their heads. The mighty empire of the Seven Suns, with their quantum AI minds, declared it impossible. The ancient Crystal Collective, who had traveled space for millions of years, formally declined to participate. Walker looked around at his team. They were a simple group: engineers, soldiers, and scientists who had worked their way up through Earth's space program. They didn't have the advanced technology of other species or their countless years of experience. But they had something else. "Sir," his second-in-command spoke up, "the other species are right. These tasks, they're designed to be impossible." Walker smiled. "Impossible. That's exactly why we're going to accept." The council chamber fell silent when Earth's response came through. The alien representatives stared in disbelief at the humans standing before them. Here was a species that still used chemical rockets for some of their space travel, whose longest living members barely reached 100 years, declaring they would attempt all 5 tasks. "You understand what you're agreeing to?" Stone asked, his massive eyes fixed on Walker. "Your species has been spacefaring for less than a decade. Many of you still live in primitive dwellings. You haven't even unified your planet's governments." "We understand perfectly," Walker replied. He stood straight, looking much smaller than most of the alien representatives, but showing no sign of intimidation. "Humans have a long history of doing impossible things. It's kind of our specialty." Laughter rippled through the chamber. A tall, crystalline being spoke up, its voice chiming like bells. "Your confidence is amusing, but this isn't a game. These tasks have been designed by the greatest minds in the galaxy." "Then they've made one crucial mistake," Walker said. The chamber grew quiet again. "They've underestimated what humans can do when someone tells us something's impossible." The council members exchanged glances. They had expected Earth to decline like the others, or perhaps make a token attempt at one of the easier tasks. This complete acceptance was unprecedented. Stone leaned forward in his chair. "Very well. Your species will begin the first task tomorrow. I hope you understand what you've committed yourselves to." As Walker and his team left the chamber, whispers followed them. Most were dismissive, some were amused, and a few were curious. None of them knew that humans had spent their entire history breaking through impossible barriers. None of them understood that telling a human something couldn't be done was the surest way to make them prove you wrong. Back on their ship, Walker's team began preparing. They didn't have the most advanced technology or the most brilliant minds in the galaxy, but they had determination, creativity, and most importantly, they had something to prove. "They think we're primitive," Walker told his team. "Let's show them why you should never underestimate humans." The challenge was set. The galaxy watched with mixed amusement and curiosity, and humanity prepared to do what they did best: achieve the impossible. The death world loomed before them, its surface a mix of angry red storms and pitch-black clouds. The Council had chosen this planet for the first task: survive for 30 days on a world that had killed every expedition that tried to study it. Walker stood at the front of his small ship, watching as lightning bigger than cities crackled across the planet's atmosphere. Behind him, his team of 5 checked their basic survival gear one last time. They had refused the advanced technology offered by other species, choosing instead to rely on upgraded versions of their tried and true Earth equipment. "Remember," Walker said, "we're not here to just survive. We're here to thrive." Their ship descended through layers of toxic clouds. The landing was rough, shaking everyone inside as winds stronger than any Earth hurricane battered them. When they stepped outside, the true challenge became clear. The air, while breathable, burned their lungs. The gravity was slightly stronger than Earth's, making every movement harder. In the distance, something massive moved through a forest of crystal-like trees. The scanner showed it was bigger than an elephant. None of the team members spoke. They didn't need to. Years of training had prepared them for harsh conditions, even if not quite this harsh. They set up their base camp in a cave, using simple but effective methods learned from countless generations of human explorers. While other species had tried to build advanced shelters that eventually failed, the humans used the natural environment to their advantage. On the 3rd day, they discovered why no one had lasted more than a week. The temperature dropped from boiling hot to freezing cold in minutes. Most technology failed during these swings, but humans had evolved to handle temperature changes. They adapted, using the cave's thermal properties and their own experience with Earth's extreme environments. "This is just like winter camping in Alaska," one team member joked as they huddled around their heat source, "except the bears are bigger and the air tries to kill you." By the 10th day, they had established a routine. They hunted the smaller creatures for food, using techniques passed down from ancient human hunters. They learned the patterns of the massive predators and how to avoid them. While other species had tried to fight or hide from the planet's dangers, humans did what they had always done. They adapted and learned. The Council watched in disbelief as the humans not only survived, but began to map the planet's dangers and resources. They had expected the team to barely hold on. Instead, they were witnessing them master their environment. On the 15th day, disaster struck. One of the giant predators, a creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a mountain, attacked their cave. The advanced weapons they had been given by the Council failed in the planet's harsh conditions. But humans had been fighting larger predators since they first walked on 2 legs. Walker led the creature away from the cave while his team set up a trap using nothing but ropes and the crystal trees. They didn't try to kill it. Instead, they used its size against it, just as their ancestors had done with mammoths and bears. By day 30, when the Council ship arrived to collect them, they found more than survivors. The human team had built a permanent base, mapped safe hunting grounds, and even started growing some earth plants in protected areas. They had turned mere survival into the beginning of a colony. "Impossible," one Council member said as they inspected the base. "This planet has killed beings with technology thousands of years more advanced than yours." Walker smiled as he packed up their equipment. "Technology isn't everything. Humans lived in every environment on Earth before we had advanced technology. We learned to adapt, to observe, and to use what we have. That's not something you can replace with machines." As they left the Death World, the Council members spoke in hushed tones. They had expected to see the humans fail or barely survive. Instead, they had witnessed something more troubling. A species that didn't just endure hardship, but mastered it. The first task was complete, but Walker knew this was just the beginning. They had shown what humans could do with determination and ingenuity. Now it was time to show the galaxy what else they were capable of. The ancient puzzle box sat on a simple table in the middle of the Council's great hall. It was smaller than Walker expected, about the size of a basketball, with surfaces that seemed to shift and change when no one was looking directly at them. For 50,000 years, it had remained sealed, defeating every attempt to open it. "Your second task," Commander Stone announced, "is to solve what cannot be solved." His gray face showed a hint of amusement. The Council had watched the greatest minds in the galaxy fail to open this box. Some species had spent centuries trying to understand it. Walker's team wasn't alone this time. The Council had allowed other humans to join them in studying the box. Among them was Walker's 12-year-old daughter, who had begged to see the famous space station where her father worked. No one objected to having a child present. After all, what harm could she do? The finest quantum computers had failed to crack the box's code. The most advanced alien races had tried everything from force to molecular manipulation. The humans were given 1 month to succeed where millions of years of combined technological advancement had failed. "Can I touch it?" Walker's daughter asked on the third day, bored with watching adults stare at screens and argue about theories. The council members present looked amused. They had long ago determined that physical contact was useless. "Be careful," Walker said, earning more amused looks from the aliens, as if a child could damage something that had survived for 50,000 years. She picked up the box, and something unexpected happened. It hummed. The council members stopped their quiet conversations, moving closer to observe. No one had ever gotten this response from the box before. "It's like my puzzle cube from school," she said, turning it over in her hands. "But it moves funny." She twisted it, not following any pattern, just playing with it like a toy. The box hummed louder. The council members watched in growing disbelief as the child handled one of the galaxy's greatest mysteries like a plaything. She didn't know about the quantum theories or the mathematical models. She didn't care about the box's historical significance. She just saw something fun to play with. On the 5th day, while the adults were still arguing about approach methods, she solved it. The box chimed, its surfaces flowing like liquid, and then it opened. Inside was a simple message in an ancient language. "To those who play, the universe opens its secrets." The council chamber erupted in chaos. How had this happened? The greatest minds in the galaxy had failed, yet a human child had succeeded in less than a week. It made no sense. But it made perfect sense to the humans, while other species had tried to force the box to follow their rules, to fit their understanding of how things should work. Humans, especially children, were willing to learn the box's own rules through play and exploration. "You didn't solve it," one council member accused. "The child did. This doesn't prove anything about your species' capabilities." Walker smiled. "That's where you're wrong. Our children are our greatest example of what makes humans special. We never lose that ability to play, to explore without preconceptions. We just sometimes forget to use it." The council members couldn't argue with success, but they were troubled. First, the humans had survived the death world by refusing to rely on advanced technology. Now they had solved an ancient puzzle by ignoring all the advanced theories and approaching it like a toy. "You don't understand what you've done," Commander Stone said quietly to Walker. "This box was meant to be impossible to solve. It was a test of how species deal with failure." "Then maybe that's your problem," Walker replied. "Humans don't believe in impossible things. To us, impossible just means no one has figured it out yet." As they left the chamber, Walker's daughter still playing with the now open box, the council members whispered among themselves. They had created these tasks to find the most advanced and logical species in the galaxy. Instead, they were discovering something far more unsettling, a species that succeeded by ignoring the rules of what was possible. The second task was complete, but the way it had been solved left everyone wondering. What other impossible things could humans do simply because they didn't know they couldn't? The arena was massive, built to hold battles between beings of any size. Today, it would host the third task: combat trials against the greatest warriors in the galaxy. Walker stood in the preparation room, wearing only basic protective gear. He had declined the advanced battle suits offered by sympathetic alien species. "You're going to fight like that?" Commander Stone asked, genuine concern in his voice. The other competitors wore powered armor and carried weapons that could level buildings. "This isn't about pride. These are the deadliest warriors in known space. I know exactly what they are," Walker replied, stretching his muscles. "That's why I need to move freely. His first opponent was twice his size, covered in natural armor plates, and carried an energy weapon that could melt steel. The alien crowd watched with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. They expected the human to be destroyed in seconds. But Walker didn't fight the way they expected. When the battle began, he didn't charge forward or try to match strength with strength. Instead, he moved constantly, using the arena's terrain for cover. The crowd watched in confusion. This wasn't how battles were supposed to work. Why won't he stand and fight? One council member asked another. There's no honor in running. But Walker wasn't running. He was thinking. He watched his opponent's movements, noticed how the heavy armor slowed them down, saw how they got frustrated with each missed shot. Humans had been studying their prey and their predators since before they had tools. This was no different. When Walker finally struck, it wasn't with a weapon. He had led his opponent through the arena's obstacles until their energy weapon was nearly drained. Then he used the environment itself, causing his tired opponent to trip on uneven ground. The mighty warrior fell, and before they could recover, Walker had disabled their weapon and pinned them in a simple but effective hold. The arena fell silent. Victory was supposed to come from superior strength or better technology. This was something else entirely. His next opponents fell in similar ways. Walker never used the same strategy twice. Against a floating creature that shot lightning, he used conductive materials in the arena to ground its attacks. Against a warrior who could predict movements, he acted completely randomly, letting instinct guide him instead of plans. The final battle was against an undefeated champion, a being made of living crystal who had never even been scratched in combat. The alien crowd had grown larger with each of Walker's victories, and now they watched in tense silence. "You can't break my surface," the crystal warrior stated. "Your weapons can't harm me. Surrender with honor." Walker looked at his opponent thoughtfully. "Who said anything about breaking you?" The battle that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had seen. The crystal warrior's movements were perfect, each strike precisely calculated. But Walker moved like water, never trying to match strength with strength. Instead, he used his opponent's perfect crystal form against them. "Your surface reflects light perfectly, doesn't it?" Walker asked as he positioned himself carefully. Then he used the arena's bright lights and his opponent's own reflective surface to create a dazzling display that confused the warrior's optical sensors. In the moment of disorientation, Walker struck not at the warrior, but at the ground beneath them. The crystal being lost their balance, and Walker used their own momentum to guide them into a soft landing area. Victory by ring out. No damage done, no strength required, just careful observation and quick thinking. "Impossible," the crystal warrior said afterward. "My species has lived for millions of years. Our combat techniques are perfect." "That's the problem," Walker replied kindly. "Perfect techniques don't leave room for adaptation. Humans are far from perfect, but we never stop learning, never stop finding new ways to solve problems." The council members were no longer smiling. This wasn't how the combat trials were supposed to go. The tasks were designed to prove that advanced technology and evolved capabilities were superior. Instead, this human had won using nothing but observation, adaptability, and quick thinking. As Walker left the arena, he heard the whispers change. They weren't discussing his victory. They were wondering what else humans might be capable of. The fear in their voices was subtle but growing. The meeting room was filled with tension so thick it felt like another presence. On one side sat the Sun Singers, beings of pure energy who had fought wars since before Earth existed. On the other side were the Deep Dwellers, ancient creatures from the darkest parts of space. Their 1,000-year war had destroyed countless worlds. Walker and his team sat between them. The fourth task seemed simple: bring peace between these ancient enemies. Every advanced race had tried and failed. Logic, technology, and even threats had proven useless. "Tell us, human," one of the Sun Singers flickered brightly, their translator making their tone sound mocking. How will you succeed where the greatest diplomats in the galaxy have failed? Walker didn't answer immediately. Instead, he asked, "Would you tell me about the day the war started?" The question caught everyone by surprise. Previous mediators had focused on peace treaties and logical solutions. No one had asked about the beginning. "They invaded our sacred space," the Sun Singer said immediately. "They destroyed our exploration vessels," the Deep Dweller countered. But Walker kept asking questions, not about battles or territories, but about how each species felt. What were they doing before the war? What did they hope for? What did they fear? "You're wasting time," Commander Stone warned on the third day. "These species have fought for longer than humans have existed. They don't want your simple questions." But something strange was happening. The ancient enemies were talking, not about war, but about their hopes from before the fighting started. The Sun Singers spoke of their dreams to illuminate the dark corners of space. The Deep Dwellers shared their quest to understand the universe's mysteries. "You know," Walker said casually on the fifth day, "you both want the same thing. You both want to explore and understand the universe. You just see it from different perspectives." The room grew quiet. It was a simple observation, but it made both species pause. "We study your histories," Walker continued. "The Sun Singers want to bring light to darkness. The Deep Dwellers want to understand the mysteries of the dark. Those aren't opposing goals. They're complementary." A Deep Dweller moved forward, "But they would destroy our homes with their light. And they would trap our energy in their darkness," a Sun Singer added. Walker smiled. "Or you could work together. The Sun Singers could light the way while the Deep Dwellers explore the shadows. Together, you could discover things neither of you could find alone." The ancient enemies were silent for a long time. Previous mediators had tried to make them compromise, to give up their natural purposes. But this human was suggesting they could keep their identities while working together. It wasn't an immediate change. Centuries of hate don't disappear in a day. But for the first time, the two species began to talk about possibilities instead of past wrongs. "How did you know?" Commander Stone asked later. "How did you know to look for their common dreams instead of trying to solve their conflicts?" "Because that's what humans do," Walker explained. "We fight, we disagree, we see things differently. But we also dream, hope, and imagine. Sometimes the best way to end a fight is to remind everyone what they were dreaming about before it started." The council members watched as the ancient enemies began making plans, not for war, but for joint exploration missions. The Sun Singers would illuminate unknown regions, while the Deep Dwellers studied what lived in the shadows between the light. "You've done something remarkable," one council member admitted, "but perhaps also dangerous. These species are now talking about combining their powers instead of fighting." Walker nodded. "Peace isn't about keeping people apart or making them change who they are. It's about finding ways for different people to work together, to be better together than they are alone." The fourth task was complete, but it had revealed something new about humans. They didn't just survive impossible worlds or solve impossible puzzles or win impossible fights. They could also see possibilities where others saw only problems. As Walker left the meeting room, he heard the Sun Singers and Deep Dwellers discussing their first joint mission. Sometimes, he thought, the best solutions were the simplest ones. You just had to be willing to ask the right questions and listen to the answers. The final task was deceptively simple. 2 space stations orbited a dying star. One held the galaxy's largest library, containing knowledge from thousands of civilizations. The other was a habitat for 1 million refugees from a destroyed world. The star was about to go supernova. The Council had provided 1 rescue ship. "Choose," Commander Stone said simply. "You have 1 hour. Save the knowledge of countless worlds, or save 1 million lives. You cannot have both." Walker stood at the ship's controls, looking at the monitors showing both stations. His team waited behind him, watching. The council members observed from their safe distance, waiting to see how humans would handle a truly impossible choice. "Every species faces this test," Stone explained. Some choose knowledge, believing it will save more lives in the future. Some choose the refugees, following their morals. Most refuse to choose, accepting failure rather than making such a decision. Walker studied the situation carefully. The council had planned everything perfectly. The distance between the stations, the power of the ship, the time available. Their calculations left no room for saving both. The test wasn't about success. It was about what choice humans would make when forced to sacrifice something precious. What did other species choose? Walker asked, still examining the data. That's not relevant to your decision, Stone replied. You have 50 minutes remaining. Walker turned to his team. They didn't need to speak. They had worked together long enough to understand each other. While Walker kept the council distracted with questions, his engineers were already working. The ship's engines are designed for maximum efficiency, Walker noted, but humans rarely care about efficiency when lives are at stake. Before the council could respond, Walker's team began modifying the rescue ship. They stripped safety protocols, rerouted power systems, and reconfigured the engines in ways that made the council members nervous. What are you doing? Stone demanded. You're going to destroy the ship. Then no one will be saved. Maybe, Walker admitted, but we have to try. With 30 minutes left, they launched their modified ship. The engines were running far beyond safe levels. The power systems were straining, but they had increased the ship's speed and capacity. They reached the library station first. Instead of trying to save everything, they quickly transferred the most critical data cores. The council protested. This wasn't following the proper procedures. But Walker's team ignored them, working with desperate efficiency. With 15 minutes left, they pushed the overloading engines to their limit, racing to the refugee station. The ship's systems were failing. Warning alarms blared constantly. This is madness, Stone declared. You'll kill everyone, including yourselves. Maybe, Walker said again, but humans don't accept no-win scenarios. They reached the refugee station with minutes to spare. The ship's engines were dying, its systems failing, but they had created enough space by only taking the most essential library cores. It would be cramped, uncomfortable, and dangerous, but they could fit everyone. As the star began its final collapse, the overloaded ship limped away. Its engines failed completely just as they reached safe distance. Emergency systems barely kept life support running. You damaged the ship beyond repair, Stone observed as rescue vessels approached. Many of the library's data cores were left behind. The refugees are packed in dangerous conditions. By any reasonable standard, you failed. Walker watched as the refugees were safely transferred to other ships, as the saved data cores were secured. We saved 1 million lives and preserved the most critical knowledge. I'd call that a success. But you didn't follow the parameters of the test. You were supposed to choose. Humans don't accept false choices, Walker explained. When someone tells us we have to choose between two essential things, we find a way to get both. Maybe not perfectly, maybe not safely, but we try. The council members spoke quietly among themselves. This wasn't how the test was supposed to work. Other species had made logical choices, or moral choices, or refused to choose. None had simply rejected the premise of the test itself. As the evacuation continued, Walker noticed something in the council members' expressions. It wasn't disappointment at their failure to follow the rules. It was fear. Because humans had just proved they would rather risk everything than accept an impossible choice. The council chamber was different this time. The usual observers were gone, replaced by serious-looking officials. Commander Stone sat in the center, his gray face unreadable. Walker and his team stood before them, expecting to hear the results of their final task. You have completed all 5 tasks, Stone began, his voice heavy, but not in the way they were meant to be completed. The screens around the chamber lit up, showing recordings from each task. The death world where humans had not just survived but thrived. The ancient puzzle box, solved by a child's play. The combat trials won through strategy rather than strength. The warring species, united instead of simply separated, the impossible choice that humans had refused to accept. These tasks were never about success, Stone revealed. They were tests to identify species too dangerous to remain free in the galaxy. The chamber grew very quiet. Walker's team tensed, but he motioned for them to stay calm. Every species that has ever completed these tasks showed the same traits, Stone continued. Determination, adaptability, the ability to solve impossible problems, the power to unite others, the willingness to break rules to achieve goals. These are the marks of a species that will eventually dominate all others. The screens change, showing other worlds, advanced civilizations that had been subtly contained, their expansion limited by carefully crafted treaties and regulations. The successful species were guided into controlled development, Stone explained. Their growth was managed. Their influence was contained. It was necessary for the stability of the galaxy. Walker looked at the images thoughtfully. How long have you been doing this? Since before your kind discovered fire, Stone replied. We maintain order. We prevent any one species from becoming too powerful. It is our duty to protect the galaxy. And now you think you need to contain us, Walker said. It wasn't a question. You completed every task in ways we didn't expect. You showed all the signs of a species that could destabilize the careful balance we maintain. But you also showed something we've never seen before. The screens changed again, showing moments the Council had observed. Humans sharing their survival techniques on the Death World. A child's joy in solving the puzzle box. Walker helping his defeated opponents up after combat. The peaceful resolution between ancient enemies. The risk taken to save both knowledge and lives. You don't just overcome obstacles, Stone said. You teach others to do the same. You don't just solve problems. You change how people think about them. This makes you more dangerous than any species we've encountered. One of the other council members spoke up. We've prepared containment protocols. Restrictions that will be presented as trade agreements. Regulations disguised as safety measures. Your growth will be limited, your influence contained. Walker smiled, and for the first time, there was something harder in his expression. That would be very concerning, he said, if we hadn't known about this from the beginning. The council members stared at him. Stone's gray skin paled slightly. What do you mean? Did you think humans wouldn't study the history of every species we met? That we wouldn't notice the patterns? The strange treaties that always seemed to limit the most promising civilizations? The regulations that always appeared just as species began to reach their potential? The screens changed again, but this time Walker's team was controlling them. They showed data, patterns, analysis, years of human research into the Council's activities. We knew about the tasks before you offered them, Walker explained. We knew what they really meant. Every success, every surprising solution, every time we shocked you. It was all to show you something important. And what was that? Stone asked quietly. That your way of maintaining order, of controlling everything and everyone, isn't the only way. That different species can work together without one dominating the others. That sharing knowledge and helping each other grow makes everyone stronger. The council members looked at each other uncertainly. For the first time in countless millennia, they weren't the ones in control of the situation. So, Walker said, his voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel, perhaps we should talk about what happens next. The silence in the council chamber stretched as Walker's words hung in the air. His team activated more displays, showing centuries of council manipulation laid bare. Stone and the other council members watched as their careful work was exposed. 342 species, Walker said, pointing to the data. All of them shaped and contained by your rules. All of them held back from their full potential. We found the patterns in their histories. A council member stood up, their crystalline form catching the light. You can't prove any of this. These are just theories, patterns you think you found. Walker nodded to one of his team members, who pressed a button. New images appeared. recordings from species across the galaxy, all sharing similar stories. The Council's influence had been subtle but consistent. "We didn't just study history," Walker explained. "We talked to other species, not their leaders or official representatives, but their people. It's amazing what you learn when you just sit and listen." "And what did you learn?" Stone asked, his voice carefully neutral. "We learned that many of them knew something was wrong, but couldn't prove it. We learned that some of the brightest civilizations suddenly stopped advancing just when they were reaching their peak. And we learned that every time a species showed too much promise, your council was there with new rules and regulations. The displays showed more data, trade routes that mysteriously change, research projects that were quietly shut down, colonies that were never established, all coinciding with council interventions. "So you set out to expose us," another council member said. "To what end? War? Revolution?" Walker shook his head. "No, we set out to show you a better way. Every task you gave us, we completed it by working with others, by sharing knowledge, by finding solutions that helped everyone. We weren't just solving your tests, we were demonstrating an alternative." The screens changed again, showing the results of their tasks, the survival techniques they'd shared with other species visiting the Death World, the joy of discovery they'd shown in solving the puzzle box, the respect they'd demonstrated in the combat trials, the peace they'd built between ancient enemies, the lives and knowledge they'd saved by refusing to accept limitations. "Your way is about control," Walker continued, "about keeping species separate and limited. But look at what happens when we work together." He showed new images, the Sun Singers and Deep Dwellers planning joint expeditions, other species adopting human survival techniques, worlds beginning to share knowledge more freely. "In just the time we've been taking your tests, dozens of species have started breaking out of the patterns you created, not through rebellion or war, but through cooperation and shared growth." Stone leaned forward. "And you think we'll just allow this? We've maintained order for millions of years." "You've maintained stagnation," Walker corrected gently. "And no, we don't expect you to just allow it. We expect you to join it." This caught the Council by surprise. They had expected demands, threats, or ultimatums. "Your knowledge, your experience, your understanding of the galaxy, it's invaluable," Walker explained. "But it should be used to guide and support, not to control and limit. Imagine what we could all achieve together." The council chamber was quiet again, but this time the silence was different. The council members looked at each other, centuries of certainty beginning to crack. "And if we refuse?" Stone asked. "Then we'll go forward without you," Walker said simply. "Other species are already changing, already working together in new ways. You can be part of guiding that change, or you can watch it happen without you." The council members began to whisper among themselves. Their perfect system of control was already breaking down, not through force, but through something much more powerful: hope and cooperation. "You're offering us a choice," Stone realized. Walker smiled. "Humans are good at finding alternatives to impossible choices. The question is, are you willing to consider one?" 1 year had passed since the council faced their own impossible choice. The Great Hall looked different now. Where once only council members sat in rigid rows, representatives from dozens of species filled the room. Stone sat not above them, but among them, watching as Walker addressed the gathered beings. "The first year of the new council has shown us what we can achieve together," Walker said, pointing to the displays showing their progress. 17 new worlds made habitable using combined knowledge from different species. The Great Library now freely shares its knowledge across the galaxy. The Sun Singers and Deep Dwellers have discovered 3 new forms of space life in their joint missions. The room hummed with energy. Species that had once been carefully kept apart now worked together, sharing ideas and solving problems that had stumped them individually for centuries. "But more importantly," Walker continued, "we haven't lost the order and stability the old council valued so much. We've strengthened it by building trust instead of control." Stone nodded slowly. The transition hadn't been easy. Many council members had resisted at first, centuries of habit hard to break. But the results were undeniable. The galaxy was growing, advancing, reaching new potential. The human way was chaos, one of the former council members admitted. That's what we always feared. But we were wrong. It wasn't chaos, it was growth. A deep dweller moved forward, its dark form contrasting with the bright energy of the sun singer floating beside it. Together, they had mapped regions of space that neither could have explored alone. We thought our differences made us enemies. The deep dweller's translator spoke. The humans showed us they make us stronger. The screen showed more images, species working together to terraform harsh worlds, sharing technology to solve ancient problems, learning from each other's strengths. The fear of one species dominating others had been replaced by the joy of growing together. The old challenges are gone, Walker announced. No more tests designed to identify threats. No more artificial limits on growth. Instead, we face real challenges together, exploring unknown space, solving real problems, helping each other grow. Stone stood up. We spent millions of years trying to prevent any species from becoming too powerful. We never considered that the real power comes from working together. The displays showed the new projects starting across the galaxy. The death world where Walker's team had survived was now a training ground where species learned from each other. The puzzle box that a child had solved through play was being studied not to unlock its secrets, but to understand different ways of thinking. Some asked why we didn't just expose the old council's control, Walker said. Why we went through their challenges instead of confronting them directly. The answer is simple. Humans don't just want to win. We want to show a better way. The gathered species murmured in agreement. The humans hadn't just completed impossible tasks. They had changed how the galaxy thought about possibility itself. So what comes next? Stone asked, but his tone was curious rather than worried. Walker smiled. That's the best part. We don't know. For the first time in millions of years, the galaxy's future isn't being controlled or limited. We'll face new challenges, make mistakes, learn, and grow together. As the meeting ended, species that had once been kept carefully separate mingled and talked. Ancient enemies planned joint ventures. Young civilizations learned from older ones while teaching them new ways of thinking. You know, Stone said quietly to Walker, when we created those challenges, we thought we were testing other species. But in the end, they tested us. Walker watched as his daughter, now a year older, played with children from 3 different species, all of them laughing as they tried to solve a new puzzle together. That's the thing about challenges, Walker replied. They show us who we really are. And sometimes, they show us who we can become. The galaxy was changing, growing, evolving. And it all started because someone dared to challenge humans, and humans dared to show them a better way.